After accepting the job under a false identity, I quickly realized that wearing a maid's uniform was the easiest part. Living as one every hour of every day was something else entirely. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Eleanor Hart, noticed every tiny mistake. The way I carried a laundry basket, how I folded fresh towels, even the sound of my footsteps across the polished wooden floors. Nothing escaped her attention. "You walk like you're rushing to catch a train," she said one morning. "A professional maid moves quietly. Every step should be deliberate." From that day on, my education truly began. Every morning started with housekeeping lessons. I learned how to make a king-size bed so perfectly that not a single wrinkle remained. I memorized the correct order for cleaning each room, how to polish antique furniture without damaging the finish, and how to arrange fresh flowers exactly the way the estate owner preferred. Afternoons were devoted to etiquette. Mrs. Hart corrected my posture whenever I slouched. She reminded me to keep my shoulders relaxed, avoid long strides, and maintain calm, respectful eye contact without staring. She taught me how to greet guests politely, serve afternoon tea without spilling a drop, and remain composed even when someone asked unexpected questions. "The best staff," she often said, "are remembered for making everyone else comfortable." The hardest lessons came in the evenings. Because my disguise depended on avoiding suspicion, I practiced simple, natural makeup that concealed masculine features rather than drawing attention. Mrs. Hart insisted it should look effortless. "If someone notices your makeup," she warned, "you're wearing too much." I spent hours learning how to blend foundation, shape my eyebrows naturally, and style a shoulder-length wig until it looked convincing enough that even I sometimes forgot it wasn't my own hair. Then came my voice. I recorded myself reading books aloud every night, listening back with growing frustration. My natural tone always slipped through whenever I became nervous. "Breathe," Mrs. Hart reminded me. "Don't force a higher voice. Speak gently, clearly, and at a comfortable pitch." Night after night, I repeated the same paragraphs until speaking as Maya began to feel almost automatic. That frightened me more than any lesson. At first, I was acting. After a few weeks, I stopped thinking before answering to the name Maya. When someone called it from another room, I turned instinctively. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just protecting a secret anymore. I was slowly becoming the person everyone believed I was, and I couldn't tell whether that made my disguise stronger or made losing myself far more likely. The first morning I woke without immediately remembering who I was. For a few quiet seconds, I simply stared at the white ceiling above my narrow room in the servants' quarters. The alarm on my bedside table chimed softly at 6 o'clock, just as it had every day for the past 3 weeks. Then a knock echoed through the door. "Maya." Mrs. Hart's calm voice called from the hallway. 5 minutes. Not Ethan. Maya. The name reached my ears before my thoughts did. "I'm awake," I answered automatically. The words left my mouth before I had time to think about them. Only after her footsteps disappeared did I realize what had happened. I hadn't been pretending. For that brief moment after waking, Maya had felt more natural than the name I'd carried for 20 years. A cold knot settled in my stomach. The mansion ran like clockwork. Breakfast trays had to reach every bedroom at precisely 7:30. Fresh flowers were replaced before 8. Hallways polished before guests wandered downstairs. Every maid knew their responsibilities without speaking. Except me, or at least the version of me that still remembered being Ethan. Mrs. Hart handed me a silver tray stacked with porcelain teacups. "Drawing room." I nodded. She watched me carefully. "No." I blinked. "What?" You nodded. "Yes. A professional maid answers properly." I hesitated. "Yes, Mrs. Hart." She smiled faintly. "Better." Tiny corrections. Hundreds of them. Each one seemed insignificant. Together they rebuilt me. Walking became another lesson. Mrs. Hart stopped me halfway across the marble entrance hall. Again, I turned around. I walked. "You stomped." "I wasn't trying to." "I know." She folded her hands. "Listen." The hallway became silent. Then she walked across it herself. Barely a sound. Even her shoes seemed to glide across the polished floor. "People notice noise," she said. "They remember it. For the next hour, I crossed the same hallway again and again. Too fast. Again. Shoulders too tense. Again. Too long a stride. Again. Arms swinging too much. Again. Eventually I stopped thinking. My steps became smaller, quieter, balanced. Mrs. Hart finally nodded. There. I looked behind me. There wasn't a single footprint on the freshly polished floor. Housekeeping proved harder than I expected. Cleaning wasn't simply cleaning. Every object had its place. Every surface had its method. One mistake could ruin furniture worth more than everything I owned. Mr. Aldridge, the estate owner, hardly noticed the staff, but he noticed perfection. Mrs. Hart reminded us daily. He never thanks excellence. He only notices mistakes. That terrified everyone, especially me. One afternoon I dusted the enormous library. Thousands of books lined dark oak shelves reaching almost to the ceiling. The room smelled of leather, old paper, and cedar wood. Peaceful, until I heard footsteps. I froze. Mr. Aldridge entered without looking at me. He walked straight toward the fireplace, picked up a book, paused. My pulse stopped. He turned toward the bookshelf I'd just cleaned. His finger traced the edge of one shelf. A single thin line of dust remained, barely visible. He looked toward me. You missed a spot. Nothing more. No anger. No shouting. He simply placed the book back, then left. My knees nearly gave way. Mrs. Hart appeared moments later. You've learned something. What? He notices everything. The evenings belong to practice. Voice. Posture. Conversation. Mrs. Hart carried a notebook. Today's lesson. Unexpected questions. What is your hometown? I answered immediately. She shook her head. Too fast. Again. What school did you attend? Again. How long have you worked here? Again. Every answer had to match Maya's fictional history. Every detail. Every date. Every memory. She wasn't simply teaching me to lie. She was teaching me to survive. If your story changes, she warned quietly, someone will notice. Some nights I stood alone before the mirror. The wig rested perfectly around my shoulders. Simple makeup softened my features without drawing attention. The maid uniform fit naturally now. Too naturally. I raised one hand toward the glass. The reflection did the same. I searched for Ethan. The face staring back looked unfamiliar. Not because it resembled someone else, because it no longer looked like the frightened young man who had arrived weeks ago. Confidence had appeared somewhere along the way. Subtle, quiet, dangerous. The first compliment arrived unexpectedly. One of the older cooks smiled as I delivered fresh linens. You always look so neat, Maya. Such ordinary words, yet they stayed with me all day. Not because someone thought my disguise worked, because for one impossible second, I liked hearing them. I hated myself for that. That night I scrubbed the makeup from my face harder than usual, as though removing it would somehow remove the feeling. It didn't. The mansion soon welcomed important guests, business partners, investors, charity organizers. The staff doubled their workload overnight. Mrs. Hart gathered every maid together. No mistakes. Her eyes rested on me. Maya. Yes. You'll be serving tea tomorrow. My heart dropped. In front of everyone? You've trained for this. But if someone notices, they won't. I've never served 12 guests before. You'll learn. Simple. Final. No discussion. I barely slept. All night I imagined disasters. Dropping a tray. My voice slipping. Someone recognizing me. The wig shifting. Questions. Too many questions. By dawn my stomach churned. Mrs. Hart noticed immediately. Nervous. Terrified. Good. I stared. Nervous people pay attention. The afternoon arrived. The drawing room sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers. Expensive suits. Elegant dresses. Quiet conversations. I carried the silver tea service inside. Every eye remained fixed on the estate owner. Not on me. 1 cup. 2. 3. Slowly my breathing steadied. Maybe this would actually work. Then I heard a familiar laugh. A voice from another life. My entire body froze. Standing near the window was Daniel, my former college classmate. Someone who had spent 2 years sitting beside me during lectures. Someone who knew Ethan better than almost anyone. He turned his head. Our eyes met. Recognition flickered across his face. He frowned, as though trying to remember where he'd seen me before. The teapot trembled in my hands, and for the first time since arriving at the mansion, I realized my carefully constructed new life might collapse with a single word. Daniel's eyes settled on me for only a second. It felt like a lifetime. My grip tightened around the silver teapot as every possible outcome flashed through my mind. He knows me. No, not yet. He was searching his memory, trying to connect a familiar face with a forgotten name. Myth. A guest held out an empty teacup. I forced myself to move. One careful pour. Another. My hand shook so slightly that only I could feel it. Mrs. Hart, standing near the doorway, noticed immediately. She didn't intervene. She simply gave me the smallest nod. Keep going. I moved to the next guest. Then the next. Each step felt heavier than the last. Daniel continued watching me from across the room. Not constantly, just often enough to make my pulse race. When the meeting finally ended, the guests drifted toward the front entrance. I quietly collected empty cups. Excuse me. The voice came from directly behind me. I froze. Daniel. He smiled politely. I think we've met before. Every instinct told me to run. Instead, I lowered my eyes. I'm sorry, sir. I don't believe so. He studied my face. Really? Yes. You remind me of someone. I forced a small smile. I hear that quite often. It was the first answer Mrs. Hart had taught me for situations exactly like this. Friendly, natural, unremarkable. Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe I'm mistaken. I hope you have a pleasant evening. Before he could continue, Mrs. Hart appeared beside us. Is everything satisfactory, Mr. Lewis? Daniel nodded. Perfectly. She smiled professionally. Maya, the kitchen requires your assistance. Right away. As we walked away together, I could feel Daniel still watching. Only after the front doors closed did I finally breathe. Mrs. Hart waited until we reached the pantry. You handled that well. I nearly fainted. But you didn't. He almost recognized me. Almost isn't the same as did. I leaned against the counter. What if he comes back? She folded a clean napkin with precise movements. Then you'll greet him exactly as you did today. You make it sound easy. No. She looked at me for a long moment. I make it sound necessary. That evening I couldn't concentrate. Every hallway seemed to contain another reflection. Every polished window reminded me of the double life I was living. In my room, I opened the small wooden box beneath my bed. Inside lay the few possessions I'd brought from home. My wallet, a faded family photograph, my university identification card. There I was, Ethan Carter. Short hair, nervous smile, student. The photograph looked strangely distant, as though it belonged to someone I'd met years ago, rather than only weeks earlier. I quickly closed the box. The following morning brought unexpected news. Mrs. Hart gathered the household staff in the servants' dining room. Our annual charity gala is in 10 days. A quiet murmur spread through the room. The estate will host over 100 guests. She looked around carefully. Everyone will be working additional hours. Then her eyes settled on me. Maya. Yes. You'll assist in the reception hall. I stared. The reception? You've earned my confidence. My confidence was exactly what I didn't have. Reception staff stood where every arriving guest could see them. There would be nowhere to hide. Preparation for the gala transformed the mansion. Fresh flowers arrived by the hundreds. Crystal chandeliers were lowered for cleaning. Silverware filled long tables. Every room buzzed with activity. For the first time, I wasn't treated as the newest employee. The other maids trusted me. They laughed with me during short tea breaks, shared stories, offered advice. One afternoon, an older maid named Clara handed me a perfectly folded apron. You've improved. I blinked. Really? She smiled. You were terrified your first week. I still am. Good. She laughed softly. It means you care. Her kindness surprised me. Nobody here knew who I really was, yet they accepted me as part of their team. That made the lie feel heavier. Later that evening, while polishing mirrors in the grand ballroom, I paused in front of one that stretched from floor to ceiling. The reflection showed a neat uniform, hair perfectly arranged, confident posture, everything Mrs. Hart had taught me. I remembered the awkward young man who had walked through the estate gates with a suitcase and a desperate plan. He seemed impossibly far away. The sound of footsteps interrupted my thoughts. I turned quickly. Mr. Aldridge stood alone in the doorway. He wasn't looking at the ballroom. He was looking at me. "You've settled in well." It was the longest sentence he'd ever spoken to me. "Thank you, sir." He glanced toward the polished mirror. Mrs. Hart rarely misjudges people. I've learned a great deal. "So I've noticed." Without another word, he continued down the corridor. The encounter lasted less than 30 seconds. Yet somehow it felt significant. For the first time, the owner of the estate hadn't seen me as the new maid. He'd simply seen me as a capable member of his staff. That night, however, another surprise awaited me. Mrs. Hart knocked on my door. She carried a sealed envelope. "For you." I frowned. I wasn't expecting mail. Neither was I. The envelope had no return address. Only one word written neatly across the front. Maya. My hand suddenly felt cold. No one outside the estate should know that name. Slowly, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single folded sheet of paper. 5 handwritten words. "I know who you are." There was no signature. No explanation. Just those 5 words. I read them again. And again. My heartbeat echoed in the silent room as one terrifying question filled my mind.